Good evening. Welcome to the West Yorkshire Football Show. We are looking at all things BD postcode related because, in a bit of a strange coincidence of a day, as the manager comes in at Bradford City, the management departs Bradford Park Avenue. Delighted to say, joining us are our two Bradford-related correspondents, Gaz Walker, who Bradford City fan, and Lewis Sale, who is Bradford Park Avenue and our non-league super fan as well. Thanks for joining us, gents.
No problem. You all right, Chris?
Very well. Gaz, let's start with you. We kind of wondered when this day would come. It's been quite some time. You've literally been counting the days, I think, since Mark Hughes' departure. And his replacement has taken the form of Graham Alexander.
Yeah, it's been 5 weeks, and Graham Alexander was still in work at MK Dons when Mark Hughes was sacked. So it makes you wonder how long he's been the target, to be honest. Well, presumably he wasn't, because Danny Carley was the target at first. But to be honest, I'm quite happy with Graham Alexander out of the names that were left to look at, none of the out-of-work managers. I think he's a guy who knows the lower leagues. He knows League One, he knows League Two. He's had success pretty much, well, say success, but a relative amount of success wherever he's been, apart from MK Dons. Did well at Motherwell, did well at Fleetwood, did well at Scunthorpe, did well at Salford. So, yeah, we've just got to take it as it comes and see how he goes. But out of the managers that were there and left available, I think he could prove to be a decent appointment, or he's the best that we could have hoped for, I think, out of the out-of-work ones.
Yeah, first and foremost, there weren't many managers that were, out there and tipped with the bookies and all that sort of thing that have the level of promotions and experience that Graham Alexander has got. And as you say, he's had promotions with Fleetwood. He had promotion out the National League with Salford. He was, I think, playoff bound with Scunthorpe as well in his career as well. So, all in all, it's a man with a good track record. I know a lot of Burnley fans personally who obviously loved him as a player and have always rated him kind of as a manager. And yeah, all in all, it looks like a really solid appointment from a neutral perspective.
Yeah, when I first saw him being linked, I wasn't too enthused, to be honest. So I don't know why. I've never really rated him, but then when you read about him and what he's done at the clubs he's been at, you sort of changed my opinion of him a little bit. Like I say, like you mentioned, promotion with Fleetwood, promotion with Salford out the conference. He also got Salford to the, I don't know what it was called at the time, what's now the Pizza Trophy. He got them to the final in the COVID season. And he was the manager at Scunthorpe when we beat them in the playoffs when Stuart McCall was our manager and we got to Wembley. So he's had success in League One as well. I think his style of play will be something that will resonate with City fans after the sort of dull and pass it sideways, sort of boring stuff that we saw in Mark Hughes. I think it'll be a bit more pragmatic, get the ball forward, play a bit more of a tempo. So hopefully that will buy him a bit of time at the start. Anyway, obviously results will determine what happens, but that should be something that we'll embrace early doors. So yeah, I'm reasonably happy at the moment.
Having seen the minute-and-a-half clip that went out on Bradford City's Twitter X account, as it is now, because I've got no need to sign up for I Follow Bradford City, I'll be honest, mate. But having seen that minute-and-a-half clip, he comes across well. From what I know of him before, I've always kind of thought he comes across as a decent enough guy. He's not a dour, miserable Scotsman. So that's the step up from Derek Adams.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if he'll be the most sort of charismatic person that we could have, but neither was Phil Parkinson. He made a comment in the brief little clip that I saw where he said, "You won't see me sat in the dugout with my arms crossed and my legs folded. I'll be on the touchline." I think that's something that he's maybe picked up on that Bradford fans were criticising Mark Hughes for. So if he has been watching us and he's seen, that we want to see a bit more passion on the sidelines, then that's a good thing, isn't it? He's done a bit of research. He knows what we're about. He says he's been there and played against us, and he's been there and managed against us at Valley Parade, so he knows, what it's like to play there and what the crowd can be in his favour. So, yeah, I think I'm, like I say, reasonably happy. Pragmatic football, but positive attacking football, and he'll get a decent start from me.
Do you think as well, Gaz, it's almost going a little bit, not a backward step, but it's kind of, for me, seems quite similar, not the same, but similar to Derek Adams' appointment, where, he knows the leagues, he's quite experienced enough, he has a certain way of playing football, whereas Mark Hughes, let's be honest, didn't have the experience in this lower league. And I think one important thing, which we all know at City, is fans are a massive, massive part of that club. with the numbers that you normally get every other Saturday at Valley Parade. It's so important, isn't it, that he gets the fans on side and, like I say, gets people, on the edge of his seat a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I talked about this on previous pods. Like, people often talk about good football. Like, to me, good football can mean all sorts of things. It means something different to one person to what it means to somebody else. But at Bradford, I think we've learned from sort of watching Mark Hughes that what we want to see is tempo and a high press and chances created on goal. And we're not particularly bothered about possession and pretty passes and stuff. So if he will be the opposite to Hughes in that respect, which is only a good thing because the fans were just fed up. They were just fed up of it. Like you said, Derek Adams was a bit like that, but I'm hopeful that maybe he won't be as big a liability in front of a microphone as Derek Adams was. You're right that Hughes didn't understand the lower leagues, and he got beaten with that stick a lot by supporters, and people were saying like he's trying to play Premier League football with League Two footballers. Graham Alexander ain't going to do that, is he? He knows what it's about. He knows he's been there. He's done it. He's managed other teams. He should know what he needs to do to get us out of that division. So hopefully that'll stand him in good stead too.
Do you think he's almost got to work within the confines of the infrastructure that's already there, or do you think he might have a bit of a saying to maybe change some of the things to get City back up the league and pushing at the right end of the table?
We've talked, hasn't he? At least as well, he's got his own man as number two for a start.
Yeah. I always think that's important because in the past, City have brought managers in and they've not had a number two. David Hopkins didn't have a number two. Gary Bowyer didn't have a number two.
Really?
So that was something that obviously Mark Hughes did and Derek Adams. I don't even know if Derek Adams did, to be honest. Mark Hughes did. So obviously that's a bonus. But talking about structure, we've talked about this in the group chat, haven't we? And I'd be very wary of letting a manager bring in too many of his own people, because then if it doesn't work out with the manager, you end up having to replace all these other people as well. What I would have liked to see us do, I said previously that there wasn't really a standout candidate, and maybe there wasn't other than Cowley, or maybe until Graham Alexander was sacked by MK Dons. But when there wasn't a standout candidate, I would have liked to have seen us go down the route of a director of football who can sort of run the whole football operation. It can set a style of play, build a profile of the type of manager that we wanted. I'd have liked to have seen somebody like that come in. Now, I wouldn't be, now that we've gone with it, you'd have ideally done that before you'd got a manager in, because the director of football would have had a say in who the manager was going to be. So to go do it the other way around, I'd be a bit worried about. But long term, I think that's what we need to do. Whether that can be done with Stephen Gent there, I don't know. Would a director of football and a head of recruitment clash? Maybe they would. But yeah, long term, I would like to see that plan and that structure. Now we've got a manager, it's probably not going to happen now, but it might do further down the line.
Here's one. Is Alexander a safe option?
I don't know, really. There's nobody out there that would... He's not a risky option. I wouldn't say he's a risky option.
He's steady, isn't he? He's kind of down, I think. He's neither a really safe nor a really risky appointment. I say, from a neutral perspective, looking from the outside, I look at that and think that's a really solid appointment. It suggests to me that he can get Bradford City at the minimum playoff bound.
He's not somebody like, we were getting linked with Joey Barton. He's not a Joey Barton. That'd have been a risky appointment. Do you know what I mean? Because he's another liability in front of the microphone, isn't he? So, do you know what I mean? And he's a scumbag. So, he would have been a risky appointment. I mean, a lot of City fans have talked about it. It would incredibly split the fan base. But a lot of City fans, every time the managerial position comes up, talk about Steve Evans. That would have been a risky appointment because of his history with the club, and I don't think it would ever have happened. So in regards to them two, he's very much a safe appointment. Obviously, people were talking about even Benito Carboni got mentioned. That would have been a lot riskier appointment. If you go with somebody like, Kevin McDonald had got the job in his first managerial role, that would have been a risky appointment. So he's a lot safer than those sort of people. So in that respect, maybe he is, Lou. Maybe he is a safe pair of hands, but he's also a manager who's got success at the level. So in that respect, he's an ambitious appointment.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, Chris, you must have been kind of reading my mind as well. I think from outside looking in, it's a relatively solid appointment, isn't it? I think you look at a lot of. This is no disrespect to other teams in League Two in terms of the size of a club we keep on talking about, but some other teams have kind of maybe pushed the boundary possibly a little bit more and just kind of kind of fought outside maybe the virtual football wall, so to speak. We spoke about it, haven't we, in our chats and podcasts before. You look at Barrow going and getting Pete Wild at Halifax and, working near miracles there. And, there's a couple of names I've suggested that, probably I think could have done a very good job at Bradford City. One, ironically, Phil Parkinson, not the Phil Parkinson that a lot of Bantams fans love, but the other one that's at Alty. He's worked, Chris will know from non-league, an absolute a joy at what he's done at Altrincham. Despite getting relegated, he's built that club back up from absolutely, pretty much nothing, to being up there as one of the best non-league teams. And this is where it's hard, isn't it? Until somebody's given that opportunity to prove what they're worth. And that was my question about is Alexander a safe option, considering the amount of fans you get, the amount of coverage that they get. That it's a pressurised job, isn't it? At the moment, regardless of where you are in the table, it's a big job for League Two, and it's one of those that the powers that be have kind of maybe got to balance that risk and reward element to it.
Yeah, I think
actually.
Sorry, go on, Chris.
He's had pressure jobs before, though, hasn't he? Let's be honest, like the Salford job, and from a completely different, it's not number of fans and supporter fan base pressure in there. It's ownership and the obvious fact that everybody's looking at you because you're Salford and you're owned by the class of '92, and also you're pumping millions into, at the time, a conference club. Fleetwood, another club that had a hell of a lot of money as they were working their way up through the leagues, but he's had success there. To Motherwell, a top flight club, albeit, the SPL, that he kind of took into Europe. Admittedly, didn't go well once they got there, but got them into Europe. So he has had kind of pressure jobs before, hasn't he? But in a different way. So nobody's thinking the pressure at Bradford is the fact they've got a big budget. The pressure at Bradford is 17,000, 18,000 fans week in, week out that can turn if they don't like what they're seeing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, sorry, guys. Yeah, I think it's fair. Right, I think, and also my kind of what I might be trying to get to, and I'll be as blunt as I can be. And he's not even probably taken one training session yet. If Alexander fails, is that a part on him or is it a part on the club? Because he's had success everywhere else. Adams has had the same, and that would be, look, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and we can predict what might happen. But if Alexander doesn't work out at City, this is my point. Is that something on the actual club itself that something needs to change, or is it just another appointment that just didn't work out?
I think you're right. I think any manager that comes to City and doesn't do well can write it off and say, well, that's Bradford City. They're a basket case. Derek Adams has gone elsewhere and gone back to Morecambe and he's got them above us in the league. They're are they in the play? I think they're in the playoffs, aren't they?
They're flirting between like third and fourth, that sort of area, aren't they?
So I think anyone that comes in and sorry, go on.
And to be fair to Derek Adams, and I don't like giving credit because I'm not a big fan of his person just as a bloke, but he had to rebuild that squad completely in the summer after relegation, and they're still right up there at the moment, aren't they? Did that come through, or have I just frozen completely?
I think I froze for a bit. I'm back on now.
I kind of made my point.
Just didn't like what you said, Chris. Yeah.
But yeah, anybody that comes in can write it off as if it doesn't go well. Well, that's just Bradford City. Anybody can do that. And you talk about like the pressure. He's probably not had the crowds behind him before that he'll have at Bradford City. But I liked the way he made a comment about that straight away and said we need to get these fans on side, sort of thing. We need to use this place as a positive because it can be a really difficult place to come and play. But we want it to be a difficult place for other teams to come and play, not a difficult place for us to play. Which is a very sort of good point to make because it can become a very difficult place for the home team, as you lads will know, just from watching City from a distance. It become you were there with Rochdale the other year, weren't you, Chris? And you saw how toxic it can get very quickly. So he understands that. There is the criticism that he's always probably had money to spend wherever he's been, other than at Motherwell. I don't know. Yeah, he will have done. Even at Scunthorpe, he'll have had money because at that time they were being funded by the Wilkinson owner, weren't they? So, even there he had money. He won't have probably the same amount of money that he's had to spend, but he'll have the crowd there. He'll have a decent amount of money. I would imagine that we're a top 5 budget in the division, or definitely a top 8 budget in the division. So he'll have the money to spend compared to some. But he's had that pressure before, which can only stand him in good stead. Let's see how he goes.
I guess in this case, from the financial aspect, he's already got. I mean, we talked, I think, in pre-season over the course in terms of the squad size at Bradford. That budget, I guess, is very much already spent. So it's going to be interesting to see how he works with what he's got. And then, frankly, when it gets to January, who he can shift out to free up the funds to bring in who he would like to add to the squad.
Yeah. I mean, just going back to the pressure point, I think it's key to realise that that job can cause pressure to people who you really wouldn't expect it to cause to affect. You know, me and Lou were just talking before the show came on about I would never have thought it would affect Derek Adams the way it did, but you could tell in his interviews after matches it were getting to him, and some of the stuff he were coming out with. I mean, I know he says stuff in interviews anyway, but some of the stuff you could see he were cracking up. So you know, it's a special type of person that needs to be able to handle those interviews. And the pressure going towards the budget, I think you're spot on. The squad's bloated. We've got too many players in certain positions and not enough players in others. I think we've got a 30-odd man squad. It's one of the biggest in the division. We were signing players on long-term contracts, which I presume we were doing because we couldn't sort of spread the money over a longer period of time, if you know what I mean, because we couldn't afford to match the wages that they would have needed over a shorter period of time. The squad needs surgery in January, definitely. There's 4 or 5 players who you'd look at straight away and say, most City fans would say they can go. We don't need them. Whether he'll be able to get them out. Most of them, I think, are either out of contract at the end of the season or on loan. The only one who you'd say he's under contract for next season who you won't want there is Ash Taylor, which we all said at the start of the season. Nobody knew why we signed him anyway. But yeah, the 4 or 5 players that most fans would agree on need to go. Hopefully he'll be able to sort of get them out and use the money that's saved there to bring his own players in January.
Come think of it, am I right in thinking that Ash Taylor turned up, was it Aberdeen?
Kilmarnock. And he might have played for Aberdeen as well. He was at Kilmarnock last season.
Been at Aberdeen before, yeah. But
before that, yeah.
There's a reasonable chance that Graham Alexander would have managed against Ash Taylor during his spell at Motherwell then, because he was there for a few years.
Yeah, to be fair, I was really critical of Ash Taylor, like when we signed him, just based on what other teams' fans were saying about him. But when he played against Wrexham, the game against Wrexham, when we should have won, we drew 1-1 and we should have won that game. He had a really good game. He came in for Matty Platt and had a really good game. But then he has reverted to type since in the last 2 or 3 games. He's been as bad as we thought he'd be. But yeah.
One of your size stuff, isn't it? There'll be players that are out of favour now, but actually, this is their chance. New manager, likely a new style of playing. This could be their chance for Graham Alexander to kind of rejuvenate some of those players that maybe have been cast out by Mark Hughes, that actually might be able to thrive under a new manager. All sorts of clubs.
We're saying like those 4 or 5 players. I can't see those 4 or 5 that I'm talking about turning it round, but they might do. You never know. New manager, like you say, new lease of life, new breath of fresh air. What's also interesting is I think Graham Alexander will know Kevin McDonald, won't he, from the time at Burnley? So he'll have an insight there straight away.
Yeah.
I think he'll have an insight there straight away into sort of obviously McDonald was in charge for 5 or 6 games, and he'll be able to give him the lowdown on the squad, which will be really beneficial. So that's a positive too. Yeah.
What do you think's his first job then? If you are Graham Alexander, Gaz, what's your first job? What have you got to do?
You've got to get the crowd on side, and I think the type of football that you play is a big part of that. And I think he'll have learned from watching what happened under Mark Hughes and the brief sort of resurgence we had under Kevin McDonald, what's needed in that respect. Like we talk about at City, the crowd's massive and you've got to get them on side. And if you can manage to do that, then you're going to have a bit more pay. People are going to give you a bit more time. So yeah, the first thing is get the crowd on side. I think tempo, chances on goal, high press. I think that'll be a big start for him. And I think based on what I've read about him, you're more likely to get that than you were under Mark Hughes. So that's the first job. Style of play and using it to get the crowd on side.
Yeah, and I think as well, I mean, I know we were just looking as well before we went live, is, you know, the next 3-4 games on paper look quite tough, don't they? You know, you've got the likes of Accrington, Notts County coming up, you know, teams who are at the moment above City. So if there's a bit of pressure now, you can either flip it 2 ways, can't you? If he gets off to a losing start against some of them teams, people are going, well, it might not be his fault, or this isn't the right man, or if you win them games, he's almost becoming almost a bit of a messiah straight away. But do you also think as well, Gaz, bearing that in mind, is he might be coming into a different Bradford City where expectations are possibly a little bit lower than the other managers may have done, like Sir Adams and Hughes?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about on the pre-season pod like what my expectations were for the season, and I looked at the strength of the division this year and saw that it'd be a lot harder than last year straight away. So I was never really confident of promotion. When you look at the table now, and we're in 16th, we're closer. I can't think off the top of my head what the points is, but we're closer in terms of positioning the table to the relegation zone than we are.
I think you're bang on halfway between second and bottom, pretty much 10 points either way.
So there you go, and the problem's going to, awful as it sounds, if we do get off to a bad start, then we could easily get sucked towards that bottom of the table. So in that respect, maybe expectations will be tapered slightly, especially compared to what they were when Hughes came in, and especially compared to what they were from those people that weren't looking at the strength of the division at the start of the season.
Gail has been to the college. Says it's funny how certain managers seem to have good records in different leagues. Now we talked about Alexander's record at this level. Now I've got to say, because Gail's follow-up comment was that, as in Daniel Parker in the Championship, Gail is a Leeds fan, I will add. But she makes the point, and I'll say this goes back to the Graham Alexander and being a fairly safe pair of hands on the face of it for the league. He's got that experience. First game on Saturday, obviously he's going to have this full week, Monday to Friday, to kind of get, initial ideas across, get used to the squad, get a bit of an idea of what he's working with. Barrow, on Saturday, where are you thinking? I mean, obviously, how the hell do you think this is going to go? The first things first, Valley Parade is going to get behind him, as it would for any new manager.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's probably Pete Well probably looks at it and thinks, why us? Because it could get, if it was Hughes still in charge, or worse, how it was toxic under other managers, it's a great place to go as an opposing manager. But when a new manager comes in and talks about getting the crowd on side and embracing it, it's going to be a tough place to go. So yeah, tough game. They're doing well in the league as well, aren't they? Pete Well was one that was linked with us. I
was about to say, wasn't he linked with the Bradford job? I mean, yeah.
Obviously, it'd have been one that we'd have had to pay compensation for. So it was probably never going to happen. But yeah, I remember last year they came to us and we battered them, absolutely battered them in terms of possession. We out creating too many chances on goal, and they scored with probably the only foray into our half in probably 90 minutes of football, and scored and beat us 1-0. So anything, there's improvement on that, really. But direct football, positive style of play, get the crowd on side. Hopefully it'll be a tough place for Barrow to come on Saturday, which it wouldn't have been a few weeks ago at all.
Who have you got fit up front? Because there's a fair chance he might just play more than one striker. Give you something to get really excited about.
That is something that fans have noticed already, that they've looked at how he lines up with other teams. He does like to play more than one up front. Now, City, for the last few years, probably since Mark Truman and Conor Sellers was in charge, have always played 4-2-3-1, barring that little brief foray into three centre-backs that Hughes tried at the start of the season. To me, Andy Cook, over the last few games, I think Hughes rushed him back because I don't think he was fully fit, and Hughes knew he needed to get him in the side. When I'm watching him, I went to Sutton the other week, Sutton away, and the first half, he didn't look fit. The Wrexham game before that, he didn't look fit. Second half, I said to my dad on the way home, my dad rang me on the way home and said, how was it? Because we'd lost 2-1. And I said, I think Cook had an injection. I could be completely wrong, but I said, I would not be surprised if he had a painkiller injection at half time, because the transformation in him between the first half and the second half were massive. Now, obviously Cook's massive for us anyway, but he's been really important, and we've had to keep playing him because Verdane Oliver's been out injured for 6 months. I believe that he is now in full training, so that's going to be a bonus for Graham Alexander. He's going to have another striker that you can rotate Cook with and rest Cook a little bit. We've got Tyler Smith there up front, who's obviously a totally different type of striker, but played up front in the Pizza Trophy last week and scored a hat-trick. So he should have a bit of confidence about him, especially if you're going to go with big man, little man. Tyler Smith, Andy Cook might work. Matt Derbyshire's the other striker, and he's been sort of on the coaching staff, really helping Kevin McDonald. So he's not featured in the match day squad since the Grimsby game on Sky a couple of months ago. Striker's something that we'll have to look at in January, I think, definitely. Jake Young.
I was about to say, it's got to be said, given how well Jake Young's doing there, that surely for him, given the severity, shall we say, of how much he was frozen out by Mark Hughes, he'll be looking at this, obviously, this change at Valley Parade management-wise, and, obviously things are going all right for him at Swindon. Well, take out their result on Saturday. But things, there's a real opportunity, isn't there, for Jake Young potentially for him to be recalled by Graham Alexander, see what he can do, get his chance in a Bradford City shirt.
Yeah, he was one that was properly bombed out by Mark Hughes. There were all sorts of rumours about the falling out that had gone on there. There was rumours that he'd fallen out with Jake Young and he'd fallen out with Matty Foles, and that's why they both left. Now Jake Young's obviously gone to Swindon. When he was playing for us at the start of last season, he was playing sort of on the left wing, wide left. I'm not quite sure where he's been playing for Swindon. Has it been more sort of behind Charlie Austin?
That's been my understanding, yeah.
Yeah, a bit more central. So maybe he would be a good option to come in as sort of, if you could have like Cook, Oliver.
Well.
Say again, sorry?
He was central at Forest Green when he was kind of getting a decent return as well.
Yeah, he was. Was he back up to Matty Stevens at Forest Green?
Yeah, I believe so. Again, it was playing in that central striking position.
Yeah, he's got a great shot on him. A couple of goals he scored for us last season, sort of great finishes. Maybe him, Tyler Smith as the two sort of smaller strikers, and Verdane Oliver and Andy Cook as the two biggest strikers, rotate them. I think that put us in a lot better stead than we have been so far this season. So, yeah, he's probably he might not want to come back. He might be enjoying Swindon so much, but he's got that option now, hasn't he? With Hughes gone, definitely.
Couple of comments from Neil. Alexander needs to get competition up top for Cook and in goal for Lewis. Hopefully in January he can bring reinforcements in then. And the follow-up comment as well from Neil saying Cook and Lewis know they have no real competition for their places. Young and East get the both back in Jan from Swindon and Rochdale. I'm not going to lie. From a Rochdale perspective, don't take Ryan East back. He's been excellent for Rochdale. And also, Dale don't have enough players to be able to let him go back.
I was going to ask you how he'd done, Chris. I keep meaning to message you, actually. Well. Yeah, he scored a good goal the other week, didn't he?
Yeah, he scored his first at Hartlepool last Saturday. And overall, he's just been superb. You could certainly tell over the course of the season that, bear in mind, it's been Adam Clayton's featured a lot as well.
Yeah.
But those two kind of know each other already. Soon as Ryan East came in, you could see that they've got that relationship. And as I say, Ryan East has been superb, to be honest. Admittedly, it's a league below. But, yeah, please don't take him back from a perspective.
He always looked good when he got brief time in the team at City under Hughes. Fans, it was one of those that fans wanted to see more of, and he never really got a chance. So I wouldn't be surprised if we brought him back. I think the point that Neil made about competition for Cook's a good one. Like I said, last year we had Verdane Oliver. So when Cook went off the boil a little bit around Christmas time, he got taken out of the team and Oliver came in, and we haven't been able to do that this season. In a way, for me and for a lot of fans, I think it was a failing of the recruitment team to not bring a big striker in when we knew Verdane Oliver was going to be out for so long.
Yeah,
Cook needs that competition, and he needs that the manager needs the ability to rest him when he's tired or late on in games, or like I said, I believe that he's playing with an injury at the moment. So yeah, it's a good point. Oliver being back in the squad might mean that we don't need to sign one, but he'll be. Having him there as competition for Cook will be a step up on what Hughes had straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to turn our attentions to the other side of Bradford now, given that we spent 28 and a half minutes on Bradford City, and my plan was to wrap up by 7:30. Lewis.
We can do, Chris. We can absolutely wrap up now if you want, mate.
I mean, it's been, as fairly positive a day as it's been for Gaz, it's been a bit of the opposite really for you. I mean, obviously we know that Mark Bower and Danny Boshell as a management pair have kind of been struggling a bit this season. Of course, relegation last season, but they've gone after 4 years in charge at the Horsefall. It's time for a change. It seems mutual termination is what's been said. How much do you believe that for a start, Lou? Do you think one of them has walked away? They've just been like, you know what, this is all we can do? Or do you think there's been a little bit more pressure from the board? Factoring in, of course, Paul Armitage, Park Avenue director, joined us on Thursday. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't see this coming off the back of that because he couldn't have been much more glowing about the job that Bowers and Bosch were doing.
Yeah. Wow, where do we go from it? I actually put after the game on Saturday, where we lost to Bradford United 2-0, and it was a horror show. It was. You think sometimes it couldn't get worse, and then the week after it gets worse, and then Saturday was probably the lowest we felt for a long, long time. maybe even worse than the defeat to Washington in the FA Cup, who were 2 or 3 levels below, just simply because we didn't even force the keeper into a save. The keeper had to make a save just from a defender's deflection. And that's it. It's a game, my opinion, might be strong saying this, but it's one that we had to win to make that previous win against Mass count. I actually put, like I said, at the end of the Saturday's game, I felt it come to a natural end. This was even before anything had obviously happened today. I think if I'm being really honest with myself, and probably those that are watching and listening, I probably felt that maybe towards the middle of last season, definitely at the end of the season anyway, when we just got relegated. I think if I'm being honest, they may have just saved themselves a tiny bit with a run towards the end of the season where we gave ourselves in the last game of the season to potentially stay up, albeit we didn't when we lost to finally became champions. I think sometimes it just happens. You know, I don't think there's nothing to really feel not disgraced about or upset about. It sometimes just stuff comes to an end, and that's just the way it is. Let's be honest, the past 4 or 5 years have not been good at all, and that's not really a finger pointing at Mark and Danny. You know, they've worked with really, really limited resources. When we say they've done well, even though we've been relegated, have probably done as much as they possibly could with what they've had available to them. Yeah. We know we're here. We've seen it. All the stuff about the budget being one of the lowest in the National League North. But the first spell, they were outstanding. And you know, when they left previously, and when they came back, everybody felt the good times might be coming back, because that interim period between them leaving and coming back was just awful.
Gary Thompson. You fans remember him?
Gary Thompson, yeah. Marcus Lord as well. And it wasn't great. I mean, looking back on it, it's not far off from where we are now, if I'm being honest. Do I feel sorry for him? Not sorry's not the right word. I feel like I think they've probably just come to I think it probably is a mutual agreement where they've gone, we can't do much more. I think the next person or people coming in are going to have to work with the same resources. So let's be honest, there's probably not much difference. I think what people are hoping for is a little bit more hope and ambition. They still want to see changes at the top of the club. Bower and Boshell are not the answer to sorting things out. That's what absolutely not. There's other stuff that absolutely needs to change to improve things down at the Horsefall, and this might be just one piece of a jigsaw, but it isn't the answer.
I mean, what do you make of, obviously, I'll say in particular on Thursday when we spoke to Paul, from a director and the board's perspective at that stage, you know, they had the full backing, did Bowser and Bosch, of those above. So to go from that position where Paul was saying, you know, how well they've done and what a great job they're kind of doing with what they've had to work with, obviously, from their perspective, not from yours particular, to where we are now that actually 4 days later, 5 days later, this has come to it. I mean, where do you think this league kind of the top level at Avenue in the situation?
I think it's difficult because we all know when you're in that position, you know, stuff might have been said in the background. He's not going to come out in a podcast or in the public and going, he's got one game left if we loses out. That's just not going to happen. Again, what I said after Saturday is hoping is not a solution. You know, to hope that somebody's eventually it's going to come good at the time. And again, we're talking about the long-term vision and strategy and all that kind of stuff and hoping for that to happen. Hope isn't objective, it's very subjective. And we have to have, you know, something in place, concrete evidence in place to show that the club's going to start progressing. And obviously, you know, I think the pressure for more for Mark and Danny probably came more from probably the fan base than it did the board. I think the board would have probably kept them as long as they possibly could, and I think they have done. And I think Bower and Bosch have stayed as long as they could because they were comfortable. And I don't think it's not a negative for them. I think sometimes you can almost get a little bit too content, and I feel that, you know, I believe that they had opportunities elsewhere. I was surprised they didn't go for it, considering what's happening at our club. I'd have snapped the hands off for teams who I've heard might have potentially been after him. But they've stuck around and tried to give it a go, which is credit to him. We all know the, you know, cliche, great guys, great blokes. You can speak to them in the bar, you can have a good chat with them, all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, results haven't been good enough. Performances haven't been good enough. And in this cutthroat business of football, you know, that's unfortunately that's what happens when things don't go your way, that a lot of the managers and assistant managers are the ones to make way, as we know, like at Valley Parade. So it's not going to be easy for anybody who comes in. I think their remit will be is to stop this decline, which again is going to be tough. But I think from a lot of the fans' opinions at the moment is, ironically, what Gaz was saying, and what I were mentioning Thursday, the playing style's got to change a little bit. We've got to be a little bit more on the front foot. We've got to be a little bit more entertaining. And don't get me wrong, the scales of difference between City and Avenue beyond belief. We're talking, City are up here, Avenue are down here. We're not comparing both teams at all. But what we need is some progression on the pitch. And let's be honest, from Paul's reasoning, if we finish mid-table in this division, I'm telling you now, that is an achievement. That is just as good, if I'm not being honest, as us potentially reaching the playoffs in that second year, because we are looking like, at the moment, a team that will get relegated.
Couple of comments coming. To be fair, GC has touched on what we mentioned about Gary Thompson earlier on, actually, and says Thompson was only manager for 2 weeks, hardly given a chance to see what would happen. To be fair, GC, I was there when Guiseley won, I think, 5-0, and that Gary Thompson side was an absolute shambles, so there was no surprise there. Also saying big mistake was changing the CEO, and Neil, who commented on earlier on about the Bantams, but on Avenue, says sometimes just needs new voice, new ideas to galvanise the team and squad. With the constraints that Bower had been working under, it just means the cycle has ended. Focus needed now on who they get in. And that is the big question. I mean, where do you go from here? They've put a post out basically welcoming applications without necessarily the criteria for the job. Although, on the face of it, it's quite obvious that the criteria, I guess, is manage Bradford Park Avenue. It's not like it's a whole huge infrastructure to manage. You're focusing on the first team. But where do they go from here? Obviously, a lot of the pressure now swings onto Martin Knight as the director of football, the man who's receiving these applications and these CVs. And where do you go?
I think there's got to be some due diligence put in place. We've got to, the club has got to know that there's going to be coaches and managers around the local area who, probably will want to take on a bit of a challenge and maybe a step up, so to speak. I don't see us recruiting anyone who's probably like an assistant or a coach from 2 or 3 levels above. I don't see that. I think, we are going to have to look quite local and be quite astute with who we look for. And this is my point, and ironically,
Oh, Lewis, we've just lost you, mate. There
we
go. Try again.
Sorry. No, sorry, that's me. So yeah, I think for me, it's there's going to be a lot of questions. Is a person going to be full time? Are they going to be part time? Are they going to be fronting up just a men's first team? Are they going to be part of the academy? There's going to be a whole load of questions for me. Like I said at first, the bread and butter is the men's first team at the moment to get that sorted. But I think we're going to have to be quite, like I said earlier, maybe a bit astute with who we're going to look for. A bit of a blueprint, a bit of identity as to what we want to get out of this. Because, to be fair to the board, a lot of them have tried to keep relatively long-term appointments with Bower and Bosch. But then again, like you can argue Gary Thompson wasn't, Marcus Law was more interim. John Deasy in the past was quite long-term. He came back for a second spell. Is he any outstanding candidates at the moment? There's probably 1 or 2. Whether they'd step down at the moment to Avenue's level of where we are, I doubt it. For me, the ones that kind of dream off the page you're looking at, there's 2 of them I would have had who've gone elsewhere. Russ Wilcott's gone to Gainsborough, Andy Welsh gone to Guiseley. Andy Welsh was my first choice, without a shadow of a doubt. 1, he's local. 2, he's got promotion on his CV. 3, he works very well with the cannabis in communities, which is a big part of the club. But also, he's a winning manager. So, for me, you're looking at likes of Alan Armstrong, but I don't think he's going to drop down this far at the moment. I can't see that. But he brings in a very exciting brand of football, which we all know. So it's going to be really interesting to see who kind of maybe puts the name forward. I'll look across the other teams who've done well in the past. Not in the past, but recently. Look at Chris Balder at North Ferriby, done an outstanding job there, done really well. You're going to have, I would bring somebody who's got very little or no connection to the club, who can completely just shake things up a bit, because it needs shaking up a bit. There's players on Saturday that were nowhere near good enough for what they need to do.
I'm going to kind of touch on these because, to be fair, Martin Knight, the director of football, has popped a couple of comments on. But it's not welcome application. I've just reviewed what was put out, and actually, my bad on this, but it says, feel free to forward any interest directly to Martin Knight. And Martin has replied along the lines of, if you want to apply for a role in the fan, do so. They're still defining what is wanted short, medium, and long term. He's followed that up within the fact that they want the fans to be part of that definition of what we want to be. I mean, where do you kind of see it then? What is the big picture from your perspective, Lou, in terms of, how do you sell Bradford Park Avenue now, and what should be the short, medium, and long term kind of ideas from a management perspective in particular?
I think the first thing you need from a manager is short term is to keep his division. It's as simple as that. There's no other way skirting around the issue, because we're in a lot of trouble on the pitch. We're not good enough at the moment. We've shown that in recent weeks. This team is, let's be honest, is capable of going down, and the way that we played Saturday would go down. So they're going to have to work. Yes, we're going to have to probably work with a tight budget, but what I'd want from a manager is to come in, look at what we've got, because there's some good players in there. There's no doubt about it, but there's some players who are not playing to potential. For me, we've got to be a bit more brutal. If players are not playing well enough, they've got to go. We've got to be a bit more harsh with them. We've got to look around the local area. People who will potentially come in. Maybe a different face might fit a little bit better with some people who might want to play for a different style of football. We have an advantage. We have that 3G pitch, so to speak, where it might be an advantage for some teams, but there's half a division play on it. So we've got to have a combination of teams that can mix it up both in that style of play, but also mix it on some of the mud baths that you are going to get probably at this time of year as well. I just want to see a little bit more pride back in our performances, a little bit more stubbornness, a bit like in the early days of what we saw from Mark and Danny's teams, where the players would throw the bodies. We're talking about Luke River, Mark Ross, all them kind of players who would, they'd be quite happy to really put the body into it and have the face blooded up at the end of the game. And we've not seen that at the moment. And I'm not saying Mark and Danny lost the dressing room. I don't think we did. I think it was just a combination of ideas made and out.
A different type of player now, isn't it, in that squad, though, compared to years gone by? And you think back to Mark and Danny's first spell, there was players there that knew him from his days at Guiseley that would run through brick walls, that did run through brick walls for him back in the season when Avenue made the playoffs in the National League North, for example. I'd say it's just a very different sort of squad now.
That's something.
Where it goes from here. Sorry, guys, go on, mate.
I was just going to say that running through brick walls and putting your body on the line, though, that's something that fans can get behind straight away, isn't it? That you see that on the pitch, and it galvanises the fans. So I think that's. I mean, I don't know a lot about Park Avenue. I obviously just know what you put in the group chat and stuff, and it sounds like you need something like that at the moment. So maybe just a bit of somebody who might come in and get them motivated a little bit and just show a bit of fight and determination on the pitch might just be something that you need right now.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely an element of that, Gaz, and it does sound quite, it does sound very simple, doesn't it, say? But don't get me wrong, it's different at City compared to Avenue. But we've got to be a bit more on the front foot because the players are relatively young. And when they get confident, then actually, we actually look good going forward. Ironically, and I know I've put this previously in comments in the past, sometimes when we play off a cuff football, we're a far better team than we've got a little bit of structure because they feel a little bit more free. They feel a little bit more. They've got they have the ability to do something within a framework of organisation. Don't get me wrong, you do need that element, but for me, we need massively amount of experience and leadership. And I'm not talking 1 or 2 players, I'm talking potentially 4 or 5. I don't think the budget's going to stretch that far. But again, recruitment hasn't been great. And that's where we're hoping that maybe the new person comes in is able to bring some of the players they may have worked with in the past. They may not be the most easy on the eye in terms of playing football, but sometimes let's be honest, it sounds again very simple thing. At this level, you need good, honest professionals who will put a foot in, stamp on players' toes, have a bit of a word in here, and be a bit nasty because we're a bit too nice sometimes. Example being on Saturday, one of their players got free times and we're allowed to get crosses in. There was no consequences for that. that's not good enough. One time you can argue with it, twice ain't good enough, three times is completely unacceptable. And that's, we're talking about players who need to be on it all 90 minutes. So the responsibility on the manager and the coaching staff to get that sorted, because like I said, at the moment, it's not looking pretty. And Saturday was as bad as it gets. And, for those of us that were there, and again, people have been on for years, have said that that was quite dire, which is an indicator of when we've been not too great over the past 5 years.
You might find that someone just coming in with a fresh pair of eyes and a fresh voice might just help straight away, like you were saying before. Maybe I've gone a little bit stale despite all the brilliant work that they've done, and maybe someone coming in like that might just sort of freshen it up a bit.
I agree, guys. I think it's needed, and I think it's needed to help not manage but challenge the conversations at the top as well. I'm not saying that wasn't happening with Mark and Danny, but we know there's results are great, performances haven't been great, but there's also a few more issues which we've discussed, countless times as well previously. So we need somebody that's quite strong enough to manage sideways, but also upwards. It's not a massive job in terms of doing that, because we are a big club, but somebody needs to help structure it a little bit better in terms of that frame of mind, from first team to coaching to the scouting situation. We've heard previously that at the moment we don't have much scouting, which is unacceptable for any teams, whether it's subjective, objective, whatever that looks like. You need something in place to get that sorted, and hopefully that new manager maybe has his contacts, whether he has volunteers who he knows he's worked with in the past that can help him, scout next opposition. We've thrown ideas out. Unfortunately, some have gone to local rivals. So we've got to, the infrastructure on that side of things has got to be a lot better, a lot stronger. And like I say, guys, I 100% agree. I think a different face, a different voice is going to help. And sometimes things got to be shaken up. The club needs to be reset. And like I said earlier, this might be just one part of that.
You see it at all levels, though. It's just a little bit of a bounce. Maybe just a bit of a bounce. You might just get that bounce that you need.
Yeah, I agree.
Martin's made the point on the comments in terms of the players that, in particular, Mark and Danny were missing. Obviously, Luca, O'Malley, Ringo, Spencer, Hopper, all missing. To be fair to Mark and Danny, they have been bloody unlucky with injuries. But again, this is where, and we talked about this a hell of a lot last season, where squad depth is vital, and that squad depth just isn't there to cover that amount of missing players.
No, it's not there. And I'll my challenge to that is, beginning of the season, we're saying if we put our strongest 11 together, we can match a lot of teams. I still actually think that's the case, but how often does that happen in a season? You're probably talking 3 or 4 times, 5 times, and that's not acceptable when we got a whole season to play. Let's be honest, we'll look at them names. Luca, he's now in the coaching staff. Luca probably shouldn't be playing, and I know that because he said that to me himself. O'Malley, proven to be a bit injury prone already. Ringo doesn't play full season anymore. Jamie, I mean, it's horrific injuries he's sustained. Nobody can count for that. But Jamie's been injured a fair bit in the past as well.
Danny, over the last few years, even the guys.
He has picked up his odd injuries, and Hopper as well. He's been unfortunate, but picks up injuries. So, we're talking about players who very rarely, if at all, have played the whole season. And so that is part of having a squad and a team sorted where, budget might not potentially go too far, but we've got to be clever in the recruitment and the scouting of what we've got and the loan signings that we get that can cover situations like this. I mean, on Saturday, Mitchell Undu, arguably with our first choice centre back, has back issues. No, there's no hiding that fact. He suffered with him last season. He pulls up in the first 10-15 minutes, gives a sloppy pass away. We're 1-0 down. Mitch could hardly walk, and he had to stay on the pitch. We had 4 substitutes. My question to that is, there were no news about Benson from Barnes, who's been on loan. I believe he was injured, but there were no knowledge about that. Mark Ross could be called up on a case of emergencies, apparently, but wasn't there. And we had 4 subs. One of them was a goalkeeping coach. One of them was a fitness coach. So we had 2 academy lads. So this is what I'm saying. We're not good enough to carry players that can play in a case of emergency and not be there. So we've got to make sure that that new manager, he might have a similar budget, but they've got to, hopefully they're a bit more clever with who they get into the building.
I mean, Martin's put a couple of replies on. So obviously, I said that about the squad depth isn't there. Martin's reply to that was, did I mean that in volume or quality? Well, there might be possibly players, but if that's the case, then the quality isn't there as results are showing. He followed that up with the budget doesn't stretch to both volume or experience. These are the choices we have to make. And you've got a little injury update as well on Benson. Knee issue for Benson, had a scanning injection. Going forward then, Lewis, I mean, obviously we see a lot of the local football, going down Thackley and Campion and the sides at NCEL level. There's talent in these levels, without a doubt. There's talent in the dugouts at these levels. Obviously, you've touched on Boulder, who was a Northern Counties East title winner last season.
Yeah.
Where would you go? Management-wise, the local area, the slightly wider area, non-league, we see a lot of it. As you say, you've put some names out there. If you were to kind of narrow it down to a couple that you think are realistic options, I think that's the key to this, isn't it? In terms of the affordability, because obviously, as much as I would love to say Alan Armstrong would be a spot on appointment, I don't think there's the budget there to entice him down, especially given that he's worked a lot of his career up in the northeast. Where would you go from here from a realistic affordability perspective?
I mean, it's difficult. I don't know the numbers, but I mean, an ideal scenario for me in terms of looking at maybe local teams, but you're probably gonna have to pay maybe a fee or whatever that looks like at this level to somebody. I think Boulder stands out for me. I think Rich Tracy at Emily stands out. I think he's done a phenomenal job there. But again, Emily are on the incline as well. So would you want to at the moment move from Emily to ourselves? It is a step or two up, but there's there. This person does have connections with the club, and I know people might call it out with Tom Greaves at Thackley, who's done an unbelievable job. Considering what they were going through pre-season, we never ever saw that happening at all.
Yeah, to be fair to Greaves, between him and Danny Forrest, the management duo there, have done a really, really good job to the start of this NCL season. As you say, we saw them 3 or 4 times in pre-season. On every occasion, they lost and lost comfortably. We were slightly fearful for them, but they've turned it around as soon as it gets to the league campaign.
Yeah, and they've got that through contacts, experience, and people they've known in the past as well. So they've really done well. So I mean, like I say, Tracy Emily's got experience at Avenue. He's been there before as well, so he does know. Probably doesn't know not many people left there now, but he kind of probably knows what might be expected. He'll keep an eye out. So for me, those are three names that I'd throw out there, and I think we'd probably work within a budget because they'll probably want a bit of a step up in terms of the division. It's a challenge to kind of get something on the to get going, and it's a stepping stone for them to potentially even get a better job. Because we're not going to attract anybody from anybody else around our from our league. So those are the 3 I put out there. But the club have also got to do a bit of due diligence as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put this question out there that Martin has questioned to us, and we've highlighted the importance of the contacts list. But quick question: are we recruiting a coach or a contact list? I've got to be honest, Martin. The simple answer is you need both at this level. You really do. You need people that know the local area, that know the clubs around there, that you can pick up the talent for less, as well as having that ability to. And it's not even necessarily coaching. At this level, motivation is such a big thing, isn't it? And that way of galvanizing the room.
Yeah, motivation and managing. It's down to due diligence from the powers that be at the club now to get this appointment right. Because I mean, any fan says it, don't they? But taking off your fan head, this is an important appointment for Bradford Park Avenue at the moment from the situation that the club's currently in. Because, like I say, from the past of being within touching distance of going up and being in the National League North, and we know that the budget's not strong. Who wants to come into a budget that isn't a lot of money potentially to a club that's struggling? Somebody will want it. It's about the powers that be make sure that they have the right candidates, look through the applications, do the background checks, make sure have a word with people in football. What's this person like? Have you worked with him before? Have you coached with him before? Have you played with him before? It could be his question is just a personal character as well. But this is their job. That's their responsibility to get the right people in the right time. And yeah, we probably are recruiting a coach, but along with that, and a manager comes with a contact list. So again, it's about doing the background work to make sure that those people you're bringing in can potentially work within that budget, can get players in to shake things up, because at the moment it isn't working.
That's the same at all levels, isn't it? I mean, I remember saying similar things when Bradford were looking, when City were looking. Like, you need to build sort of a profile of what you want and go out and get it. I think that's the way to do it at whatever level you're at. So I totally agree, Lewis, with what you said there.
Absolutely. Well, time will tell to be fair, for both of our Bradford clubs, for City, just how things go for Graham Alexander, and for Bradford Park Avenue, where they go management route and how things progress in the Northern Premier League. But as I say, we're a good 15 minutes or so longer than we originally aimed for this show to do. But I'll be honest, I'm glad we have gone that bit longer on it, because we were able to get some depth of conversation and some comments, of course. To be fair to Martin, thanks for joining us, Martin, Director of Football, albeit via Messenger, which is great. Gents, thanks for excuse me, thanks for joining us tonight. And yeah, I mean, Gaz, final thoughts. Optimistic for Saturday?
Yeah, reasonably. A lot more than I was before the appointment was made. I think it's taken a decent amount of time. Hopefully we've got the right man, and hopefully we can have a bit of a bounce like we did under K-Mac and move a bit further up the league.
And Lewis, optimistic for Saturday?
I can't wait, mate. Absolutely can't wait. Bring it on. And then we've got a game Monday night as well, so even better.
Say again.
So we've got a game Monday night as well after the Saturday, so it makes it even better.
I mean, look, anything can happen. How many times do you see a manager kind of move on and then weirdly that same squad just work? It happens.
Yeah, I'm not going to take much time up, but even Luca and Ollie now in caretaker charge, that might even help. But the lads need something just a little bit different to make it work. Yeah,
excellent. Cheers, gents, for joining us. For those that have been watching on the stream from the start, big thank you for joining us as well, and for all your comments over the course of the show. If you're watching this on catch up, do give us a like. Feel free to add more comments. We will see them as well. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, do so as well. And make sure you hit that bell symbol as well for notifications. For myself and from Gaz and Lewis, thanks for joining us here on the West Yorkshire Football Show this evening for this Bradford City special. As Bradford City gets a manager and Park Avenue move their managers on, time will tell to see how things pan out for both clubs. Thanks for joining us.